You know what it is. Kikank. That's right. It's the phrase that pays. Kikank. Just like the summer of '96, that when I was washing my shirt on these abs. Kikank, kikank, kikank. That was a long time ago.
with borax.
Yeah, that's right. Guys, welcome back to Pencil to Pencil, your favorite live weekly your weekly live. Well, I was about to say Fortnite. Livecast brought to you by 3 Count of 3. 1, 2, 3 is the magic number. Expert cartoonist, pinch me. I must be dreaming. I love saying that. Let's do a round of introductions. I am your first host. I am JAMAR NICHOLAS, board member on the National Cartoonist Society Board of Directors, and also the Philadelphia chapter chair. On top of all of that, I am also a cartoonist in good standing. Leon the Extraordinary is my series at Scholastic underneath the graphics imprint. Get them, Leon. That's right. The newest book, Leon Worst Friends Forever, is in stores now. Go cop it. Why don't you? I would be remiss if I did not introduce the Bill Bixby of webcomics. You know him, walking up the side of that lonely internet superhighway with a melodic tinkle at his back. You would not like him when he's angry.
I don't have a Steve sticker. I only have an eraser.
Oh, I have some Stone Cold Steve Conley stickers.
Do you have a Steve Conley sticker?
I'll send you some. He is known as Stone Cold Steve Conley. What's up, Steve Conley?
I am too young to get any of those references, gentlemen.
What?
I am so excited to see you guys again. Last episode was fantastic. My name is Steve Conley. You may know me from such webcomics as The Middle Age, and that's it. You can find that on Webtoons tab as Go Comics, and my own website at steveconley.com. And I also make TTRPG stuff. So you play the Dungeons and the Dragons?
In the Dragons.
You come over to steveconley.com and get some of my game books. that's me when I had a little more tan. But I thought I had a sticker here. We're not going to waste time with that. I would be remiss if I didn't introduce the Tower of Power, the man of the hour, too sweet to be sour, the Kirby Crackle to our snap and pop, the cartoonist who walks, Mr. Mike Manley.
Hey, hello, everyone. I am not walking right now. I'm sitting here basking in the brotherhood of my. There you go.
So cold.
You're gonna come down off the turnbuckle.
That's right.
My name is Mike Manley, but you already know that. I am a 40-year hard battled, grizzled, although I did shave right before the podcast, veteran of the comic book business. I have the scars to prove it.
My scars guard. I love it. Mike, we've been talking a lot about cartooning camps these days. I was just talking to some comic strip guys offline not too long ago. And I wonder how you feel about the cartooning pool, about, say, classic comic strip artists, modern comic strip artists, comic book artists, like designers. Remember back when Entertainment Weekly was a thing and people were like doing, remember that? That was a big gig back then. Yeah. All of those different things.
Your magazine. There's a lot of magazines that had caricatures in there and things like that. And every once in a while, like somebody like Crumb would do a strip or something like that. But I think it's ironic that, and we've talked about this before, geek culture is mainstream culture now. So over the past 40 years, and I say the big event actually was Star Wars, because Star Wars became globally cool to everybody, and that was built on the pieces, the matrix of pulp and comics and science fiction and it was cool, and everybody loved it. And from that moment out, geek culture started growing, right? So now geek culture is mainstream culture. Nobody thinks of comics as just being, for juvenile delinquents, or they don't even know that term now, right? But it's ironic at the same time, because I think people, even though comics are super popular, or the characters, people still don't really know what cartoonists do. It's not like being a rock and roll person while you're out and you're performing, and cons are huge, are gigantic. I mean, there's a zillion comic cons, it seems like, every year now, more and more every year. But we're like Sideshow Bob. We're not the main draw. It's the voice actor for some, anime, or GI, the guy that used to do Bumblebee, or Top Cat or something. That'll be the draw, and people are still not that interested in artists. We have not crossed over into the, they know about, we talk about it, like they know Stan, right? Stan Lee. But that's kind of it. That's kind of it. And the last, I would say, like 10 years, especially, you can go to a show. Like, I remember the last Wizard show I did was one of the worst cons I ever did, because most of the people there were like, oh, what's that? They were just like not into. They're into Deadpool, but what are you doing? Oh, you're doing a drawing. Oh yeah. Oh, okay. Well, it doesn't resonate with them. So I think it's kind of a weird thing, that we're a weird spot to be in, where everything we create, all these ideas that we generate that really impact the public still doesn't really have a real interest in us as a profession.
That's interesting. I don't know if that, well, my experience is that because nerd culture is what it is, and we're much more accepted. I think people, if I say I'm a cartoonist, people don't know what that means necessarily. They might think it's you make cartoons on TV or something like that.
Well, they probably think it's funny too, right? Like when you say cartoon.
Yeah, but I do think it's I think people do have a sense of what that is. I think it's generally more impressive nowadays, especially to a younger generation. I think they think it's cool. I think so many people read webtoons, they read I mean, sure, people aren't necessarily, the younger audience isn't necessarily going to comic shops, but they are reading Leon. They're reading Dogman. I feel like it's much cooler now.
Well, I think there's definitely a strata of that based upon age, right? Based upon age, like, they would interview Charles Schultz on 60 Minutes, right? I don't know who else. Maybe they might interview Matt Groening or somebody, but I mean, or Gary Trudeau or whatever. But
that's so rare, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they don't really talk to, like, they never, interviewed Stanley. I mean, Stan, but never Jack. I don't even know if 60 Minutes showed up to talk to Steve Ditko, if he,
if he'd open the door.
Open the door, but I just think it's ironic, because probably at the same time, there probably have never been more young people who want to do comics. Not necessarily, draw Spider-Man or whatever, but because of manga, there are probably more young people, and especially more females, who want to do comics than there have ever been. I mean, just look at Instagram. It's like an endless flow of like people doing stuff. But it's still, we're sort of like, if you ask people about it, they would really not have a very good idea of what it is. And you know that you did drawings or whatever, and you might use everything's done on the computer now, right?
Mm-hmm.
D Fish, what up, D? Said the number one reaction I get when I tell people I'm a cartoonist is them asking if I can draw something for them, like a tat or their dog or their kid. Lol, yeah.
100%. 100%.
Yo,
Now,
can you draw my tattoo?
Right. Now, what I found is if I talk to somebody older than me, they would think newspaper. Right. Oh, you do that? What paper is your comic in? If you're about 10 years older or so, they would know Marvel, DC, because they were probably reading Marvel and DC in the 60s. But a little bit older than that, everybody thinks, oh, what strip did you draw, right?
Mm-hmm. This you'll enjoy this. I've been following Dave Pilkey's on tour right now, and he's on a world tour.
He's on the Dogman tour.
Yes. For his new book, and also promoting the movie that just came out and is already on streaming. Isn't it?
Right. Yeah, I just saw that. Yeah.
So I just saw, and this is old already, but he was in New York for some private things, a couple of signings. He was on the Today Show. I believe he went to the Empire State Building, so they lit the Empire State Building in the Dogman colors. So, but here's the funny thing: when it's on the Today Show interview, it's him and Pete Davidson, who's one of the voice actors in the movie, and they talk to Pete Davidson way longer than they talk to Dave Pilkey. I'm like, that's Dave Pilkey, and he was just sitting there.
He's not a celebrity, though. He's not what people think of as a celebrity.
I just kind of bit my lip through the whole thing. They're asking Pete Davidson about him getting his tattoos removed. And Dave just sat there with a smile on his face.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. It's
like, and I don't. Well, so hold on a second. I can't say that they don't know who Dave Pilkey is. Dave Pilkey is the closest thing to a monster celebrity cartooning than he gets enough credit for. But then at the same time, they're kind of like saying to him, "My kids love Dogman. My kid has every Dogman in his room, and we can't keep him out." But anyway, Pete Davidson,
right?
You know what I mean? So I agree with you on the kind of the slights or the disrespect. And I'm not exactly sure where that changes. Like, did he have to get up and just start slapping people? Like, I'm not exactly sure how that's supposed to go down. But there is a thing there. I'll agree with you on that, Mike.
I remember as a kid, Mike Douglas, who came out of Philadelphia. He was like an afternoon variety show, and I remember him sometimes having cartoonists on. I remember once, I think he had the guy that did Dondi or something, or like,
yeah.
Maybe he even had the guy, he had Mort Walker, and they'd have like a big pad of paper, and they would do a drawing of, like a big head or something like that, of the character. But I think, what you described is exactly what I'm talking about. So you can create Dogman, but the guy that does the voice, who is like kind of like what a C-level celebrity, the guy they're going to talk to, right?
Yeah, I think that says more about the cult of personality, but I don't know. I mean, he's a pro.
The ugliest Kardashian sister would get, right? Oh, you did the sound of the chairs in the background? Let's talk to you. The Foley artist?
He said Foley artist. So, I mean, there's something to be said there. And I don't know, Steve, if you had anything to weigh on that. Like, but also it's wait, hold on. One other thing I think is interesting about this is that it takes, and Mike talks about personality all the time, right? And one of the ways that Stan Lee became such the figurehead he was is because he had that carnival barker personality. He wanted to step up and just say whatever came out of his mouth, and you're like, oh, that's the guy who does comic books. And there's still people that believe he still writes comic books. for the grave, you know. So I don't know. I think somebody has to actually step into that light and live it to be taken that way. But I also think people wouldn't respect them on the other side.
The only things I would add with Joe Murray, I want to get to Joe, but
yes,
the only things I would say is if you got to have an interview, don't have someone from SNL next to you. You know, they're going to talk to the person from SNL because it's going to be better for clicks and all that stuff. But you know, Seth Meyers often has comic writers on, so they do get some love. It's like 12:30 at night, but you know, I think people know about us. You know, just not as many as we would like. That's it.
Thank you, Steve. What we do know about is our guest tonight, you guys. I hope you paid for your whole seat, but you'll only need the edge. Joe Murray is here,
and he's here with Michael Che.
Our good buddy Joe Murray is in the green room. You guys are in for a treat. Joe is part of my lore, as the kids like to say. They talk about lore these days. A very non-gray-haired JAMAR Nicholas got into the comic book industry, and a younger Joe Murray was one of the first shop owners to give me any respect. Talk about respect. He said, even though you live all the way in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, come to Newark, Delaware, and you can have a table at my thing, or you can exhibit at my thing. You want to do a signing at my store? Holy crap, Joe Murray, I'd love that. No love in Philly, but I
think that's where we met.
Yeah, I think it was. Look at that. All roads lead to Joe Murray. And you know, he's one of my favorite shop owners, and what a steel trap mind for this business. And to that point, Joe is now the president of ComicsPro, the professional organization for comic book retailers. So if any of you guys in this live who go to a comic book store and have always wondered how this stuff works, especially what's going on right now with tariffs and Diamond going bankrupt and all these other things, you're going to get your questions answered tonight because Joe Murray is on deck. So let's waste no more time. Let me get my rendering machine together, and we're going to invite him in. Guys, welcome to Pencil to Pencil. My good buddy, Joe Murray. Ping! Joe!
Oh, hello there. I didn't see you.
Well, hello.
Welcome to my drawing room.
Well, hello, Joe Murray. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Joe, you look fantastic. You know, and they say time flies, but we're still here, brother, looking good.
If I were any better looking, Jamar, I'd be you.
You know? Well, hey, the line starts at the left, Joe Murray. Thanks so much for coming on tonight. We have a lot to talk about. I almost don't know where to start with you. You know, I wanted to maybe ask what you'd like to talk about in a way, because I know there's so many things to go over, and I want to make sure that the shop gets its shine.
Well, we just ComicsPro just had its annual conference a little over a week ago, and one of the things that came out of we'd had it in Glendale, California, and there were a great many creators who showed up for it since we were sort of in their backyard. Chip Zdarsky was everywhere. I swear to God, when I came back for 3 days, I saw him everywhere I turned. I just wait, is that, you know, I saw Chip Zdarsky's everywhere. But given how much turmoil there is going on in the comic industry right now, it's important for creators and cartoonists and comic book artists to be forming relationships with local comic shops and with retailers and everything, because sometimes the intermediaries between them don't necessarily don't have the time and the resources to kind of make the connections and hand sell the books and things that they need to. And so if the industry is going to prosper, we need all tiers of it to sort of be pulling together and working together. So I'm excited to talk to the creative side of it. I always like talking to the talent. That's talent with two capital T's, the and talent.
I'm glad those weren't air quotes.
No, that wasn't air
the
quotes. No, it's the talent. Double T's.
That's fantastic. I was
Oh, and
talking.
also I am glad you are three of my favorite people, because I have seen you all become overnight successes over the course of 20 some odd years. So
Appreciate you. It's funny, Joe. I was talking you up to somebody because we put out the kind of signpost, as I call it, for the show a couple of days early, and I was kind of drumming up some eyeballs, and I talked to one good buddy of mine who's kind of like a historian in the business, and I was explaining kind of like your lore in a way, and I said one of the coolest things I thought about when I was mentioning you is that how you've always had this really sharp mind for this business. When other people were dragging their feet on the future, you were like, well, hey, let's do this. Why don't we try that? What will be interesting? And one of the things that stuck out to me was Free Comic Book Day. And when Free Comic Book Day first started, it was like, I don't know, there's some books over there, go get them right at the shop. And you were like, let's have a party.
Yeah, that was the party was our operating term for it. When Joe Field of Flying Colors out in California created it, that was what I took away from it. As he said, this is a party to celebrate comics and the medium and everything, and that's what we went with. And so we've been trying to get that to catch on with local comic shop day, but we've had a little mixed results with that so far. But we'll talk about that a little bit, hopefully. But yeah, Free Comic Book Day, and it got crazy prior to COVID, because we'd have 1,500 to 2,000 people. I mean, you were there. We have a whole bunch of videos of you, Jamar, from that thing, little informational videos that I toted around to presentations for quite some time.
Yeah.
And I know Mike's been to a couple. I remember some a great conversation with Mike post Free Comic Book Day once. I don't quite think I can go into the details here, but it involved one of the and Tom's been at it as well. I think, Steve, you're the only one who hasn't been at one of my Free Comic Book Days, because you were usually connected to a store down in Baltimore.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So Free Comic Book Day was something that I and what's been cool about it is seeing a lot of people grow up during it. That there were little kids there and came every single year, and we might only see them once a year, but they certainly spread the word about comics and Captain Blue Hen, and that's very cool.
So what's up with Free Comic Book Day this year? Because I've read several things now because of the fallout with Diamond. I read that some people have printed books, but they don't know if they're going to ship the books. I think Fantagraphics said they printed a book of Marvel thing, which is kind of odd,
Right.
them doing that. But then they don't know whether they're actually going to pulp them all or.
So it's hard to say exactly what's going to happen. I think that the 2025 Free Comic Book Day is less in jeopardy or in question than 2026. I believe that there is enough books that are going to be coming out from the major publishers. DC has a bunch of books, has some books coming up around Free Comic Book Day that are Free Comic Book Day priced and are basically intended to be for Free Comic Book Day. Marvel, Dark Horse, IDW, those books will all come from, and possibly Boom will all come from Penguin Random House. So most of your major ones should still be able to be distributed and get to it. There's something like 40 books there were total originally, a little bit too many in my opinion, but so some of the smaller ones are going to have trouble potentially getting distributed depending upon Diamond's fate. Some of them we've already started receiving some of them already. I think we've got the one from Oni Press already. And so I think it's going to happen this year. What I'm more concerned about right now is Free Comic Book Day is up for auction. And we don't know exactly where they auctioning the whole trademark and the whole Magilla, or are they just auctioning off the domain name or whatever? Are we going to end up having to go with Complimentary Comics Day, or get your gratuitous, get your gratuitous, yeah.
So Diamond might be selling the whole kit and caboodle, or just break it up.
Well, it's one of the assets listed in the auction, and so we're not sure exactly. We're trying to figure out how that's going to work, who's going to bid on it, what's a reasonable bid for it, and we're probably more concerned about making sure that it doesn't fall into nefarious hands than it would be, than somebody else taking it, because there's a lot of responsibility and a lot of logistics behind making Free Comic Book Day work. So I'm not sure exactly how. So it's going to be a brand new gig when 2026 hits.
So there's literally going to be like, our opening bid is $5,000. Our opening,
Yeah, it's there's been conversations with Diamond. Hey, can we, like, when the Comics Code ended, the Comics Code Authority trademark ended up being given to the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund. So they actually have the rights to the little symbol and everything. Diamond is not in a position to be able to do that because it counts as one of their assets. So whatever Diamond wanted to do was irrelevant because it's all in the hands of the court and lawyers and their bankers and whatnot. So it's people who may not necessarily know the significance or importance of this. So it's going to be interesting to see how that turns out. And we can't really get enough information because there's so many NDAs and we can't find out what other people are, going on about. So right now, I would say that the number one brand of tea in the US and the world right now is uncertainty. And so we just have to, on a daily basis, just kind of wait until we get new information and then just be ready to pivot and act on that.
So what would, if you had your magic crystal ball, what would you want? Would you want, like, you would have to have a fairly large distributor be able to do it, right?
Not necessarily. I haven't quite gone into all the logistics of this and have all the conversations with it, but ComicsPro members are asking, well, can we try to buy the rights to it? And then we could sort of oversee it and still try to coordinate with everybody, but each individual publisher or distributor is sort of responsible for getting the titles out to where they need to be, instead of it all just being in Diamond's hands. However, there still would end up we still have to figure out how to market it, because Diamond would throw an extra nickel on the cost of each Free Comic Book Day comic to pay for their infrastructure and their processing and everything of the books, because the books are basically printed at cost and distributed at cost. So they had the Free Comic Shop locator. They would create branded items and things like that. A lot of that stuff could probably just be done sort of virtually right now. Like, hey, if you want to make yourself a poster, here's the things here's the little thing of us signing off that you can use it in this, what's the term? Complimentary Comics Cavalcade. I'm down with that. Exactly. And that's not going to be a difficult URL to type out over and over again at all, right. especially when the email becomes, please forward your questions to, what's that about Free Comic Book Day at canceled or at complimentary-comics-cavalcade.com.org. So .bsky dot whatever. So so it would be nice to have, ideally it would be nice to have some kind of outside, yes, to have some sort of outside organization that's kind of overseeing it, so that it's not dependent upon the fates of any one distributor or any one publisher. But we don't know how that's all going to work out yet.
So like somebody would buy it and make it an LLC or something like that, make it a nonprofit or something.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, ComicsPro is a nonprofit, so it'd be ideal to do that, and we could just have a little tiny little fee on some of the stuff in order to keep us going along on it.
Right.
And but I mean, as as the talent. I'm sure you guys all have. Like, you could probably just take whatever money's sitting in your tuxedo pockets, like Mr. Burns, and then just go ahead and buy that for ComicsPro, right?
Hey, here's something for your ComicsPro.
Excellent. Steeple fingered cards. That's so funny. So we're probably going to jump all over the road, but I want to make sure we never alienate people who don't really understand the mechanics of how a comic book store works. Because we're about to just jump into the deep end. I want to kind of go back a little bit. So back in the day when I used to teach, and I would bring my class over to the local comic shop. Rest in peace, Fat Jack's Comic Crypt in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
They're in a crypt now, actually in a crypt.
Literally, they are in a crypt. Rather than bring the kids over and let them just go, "Whoa, Spider-Man," and they would like run around in the shop, I would set up a meeting with the store keep and say, "Listen, I want you guys to try to explain to them how this works. How does a comic shop work? You know what I mean? Almost like, how's the sausage made?" And one of those key parts was kind of tying it all into the Diamond catalog, the big phone book that would come out every month. So I wonder, Joe, as far as you're concerned, where are we now with comic shops? In just like I know they're dwindling. I know Mike is good with those numbers. There used to be a cajillion. Now there's a smillion of them.
It's remained actually relatively stable over the last number of years. It depends on how nitty gritty you get on. Well, is this primarily a game shop with a little bit of comics, or different things on it? But on average, the number has stayed pretty steady, and while we have lost some, we have actually gained probably an equal number. Mm-hmm. So there's parity there. As far as previews goes, personally, we had stopped carrying previews for about a year or two prior to Diamond's current issues, because Diamond had some egregious shipping cost issues. Like the free copy of, those are my actual air quotes there, Steve. Those are my actual air quotes. These are my sarcastic quotes. So if I do this means I'm being sarcastic, right? So, the free copy of previews that we get sent to retailers could be put in a separate box and shipped to us, and that box would cost us $15. And so I canceled everything to do with previews, and then got to the point where they have little digital cards where you get a code and you could buy that for like $1 or $2 less, and you would get the digital version of previews. Oh, wow. Because of their shipping policies, these 5 ounces of cards that I had to pay $15 to get 10 of would cost $15 to ship. So it cost as much or more than a print copy of the book. So that's how ridiculous the whole system was. Diamond did semi-recently address their shipping charges and everything, and it got better. We started bringing previews back in, but Marvel does its own catalog. Image does its own. IDW, DC do their own. There's digital versions of everything, depending upon what point of sale system you use. We use Comic Hub. You can order all of that stuff as one of our customers and see all of it on the app and order those things. So there are lots of alternatives, but there is still a great deal of comfort in that previews catalog. Although previews itself has long since it's way too bloated. It should not be this thick, given how much actual stuff is in there right now. It's a little bit like the yellow pages. Like, as a store, we still get something once a year asking us if we want to do a yellow page ad, which I haven't seen a copy of the yellow pages in 10 years. Wow. And the book is this thick, but they still want to charge you as much money for an ad as they did when that was everybody's sole method of finding you, before the internet. Mm-hmm. So there are going to be alternatives. The ugly sausage part of losing previews or potentially losing Diamond is that Diamond was the source for all of the data to get in there to let us know what was coming out. And while the book market works 6 months out, so for the new Leon book, it was solicited and you could see it on, we'll say bookshop.org, 6 months ago. It wouldn't end up in most comic shops' systems until a month and a half before, or month and a half, 2 months before the book came out. And so no matter who we ordered it from, that's where we would get the information from. And if it was a manga and it was the next volume of One Punch Man, that's where our systems would pick up to tell us that this person we need to order it for this person. If Diamond goes away, we lose that. And so we're scrambling to try to figure out now how we're going to get that information in and how we're going to enable retailers to sort of continue this. The book market is not based on subscription. The comic industry is, and the comic industry is not necessarily as far advanced technologically as the book industry is. And so ComicsPro has been trying to do this thing called the Comet standard to create metadata standards. That's all that information about barcodes and BISAC codes and all of this other stuff and dimensions and everything, so that stores have clean information that they could pull in and enable them to create their online shops and to do their subscriptions and all of those things. So it is not sexy work at all. Have you ever had to sit and read an 80-page PDF about barcodes? I have. And I'm not even that deep in the weeds as some of the other people are on the metadata project.
It's almost like you would need an app. If you could have an app that did all that.
Well, so the idea is that there's all going to be something. We're trying to create a thing. I think in the book industry, there's something called Onyx or something that all of the stores pull all their information from. And, we can scrape that information from a variety of places, but there's the little piece of like a series code so that you know that the next issue of Batman is tied to the preceding issue of Batman, et cetera, doesn't exist in any of these kinds of catalogs. It was something that was predominantly created by either the publishers or by Diamond, and it's inconsistent, especially if you're going to be potentially getting if you can source a particular title from more than one place, if that data is not consistent, things don't match up. The universe breaks, the internet breaks, cats sleeping with dogs, you know how it is. So that's one of the things. That's one of the things I get to worry about and try to fix.
Which artists don't. We talk about this often. Is artists don't often understand themselves how the sausage is made, right? Like you may know about doing a drawing, but like once it leaves your desk, you have no idea. Like, well, what are the mechanics of getting it from here, my desk,
right,
to the reader? And it's really important, I think, that you understand that and the printing process and everything, because you're part of the business and you have to really understand. Because if you put out a great book, as we were talking about just before we went on, there were several comic artists in the 60s, like Wally Wood and Gil Kane, who tried to go out on their own and do their own line, like Tower Comics, and Gil Kane tried to do his own comic. His Name is Savage, and they died because they couldn't get the distribution. So you can create a great, fantastic piece of work, but if people don't see it, you can't get it in the hands.
And between retailers and creators, with the publishers stuck in the middle, a couple of things that we keep butting heads about is barcodes, logos, and placement of the logos. So right now, DC has the world's smallest barcodes on them. They're tiny, and we think that this is an artistic thing where they're trying to minimize it on the cover. Well, there's two parts to a barcode. There's the main chunk, which tells you what the book is, this is Batman or whatever. And then there's a tinier little extra 5 digits here, which gives you the issue number or whether or not it's a variant and all these different codes.
Wow, yeah.
Well, when you scan it, the big parts up here, the little parts up here, there's extra numbers. The only part you could scan is this little tiny line where they sort of line up. And when you make that small, it is almost impossible to scan these things, which means product is going out the door, not getting paid for, because your scanner will make a beep because it scanned part of the code. And unless you're directly looking at the screen when you see that, and you're usually chatting, when you're at the comic shop, you're chatting and, laying down all kinds of lines and talking about all kinds of nerd stuff like Lone Pine Marty, and you're rolling along and you're hearing the beep, you think it's scanned. It didn't get scanned. It goes out the door, or it goes out the door as the wrong item, charged as the wrong item. So that's one thing. Then when you have all of these variant covers, and they have what we like to call, we're lobbying to call full art instead of virgin covers or raw art. You can't tell what the title is. You have that up on the shelf, or if your store does those stuff. Hey, J. Roberts' store, Comic Logic. I want to holler out to Rob at Comic Logic. Yeah. You can't tell what the title is. And especially with Marvel right now, they're doing Invisible Girl or Invisible Woman covers right now. So the cover will have Invisible Woman on it, but you have to flip over to the back of the book to find out that this is actually an issue of Ghost Rider. And so I can understand that the talent wants to have, look, I did this whole piece of art and everything, but there still are some practical aspects to it in order to sell the title. And so we're kind of going back and forth on that all the time. So that's why I'm appreciating having more creators get involved in the marketing and retail processes of it.
No,
go ahead, Mike.
I was going to say that back in the day, Marvel and DC had a big sales department. And so I would assume that back when they had the big sale, up until probably the mid to late 90s.
Late 1900s.
Yeah. That I would assume would be one of the things that they would make sure, like this, they always had the little box at the bottom of the cover was already printed on there. That's where the barcode went. And that would be your job in sales, the sales force, to make sure that you had your barcode and you got the information out to the retailers and all. Is that gone away now since Disney has bought them?
It's probably less affected by Disney and more affected by the number of new owners, that the rotating door of owners that Warner Brothers and Disney have had, or not Disney, DC have had.
Right.
Every single time somebody comes and buys them, their entire operation gets pulled through the eye of a needle and ends up less and less. So they lost so much institutional knowledge during the last purge with Discovery. So a lot of this is having to, teach them how to, what the wheel is. We got to reinvent the wheel. And it ends up becoming the salespeople are kind of stuck between, or at the mercy of editorial, and marketing. So who's got the bigger stick at the point, the editors or the sales guy who's only been there for, 2 or 3 years or something to fight this fight. And again, we at ComicsPro, we're taking we try to promote the stance that assume positive intention. So when there are changes to the barcodes or the logos or things like that this wasn't done because it's an evil conspiracy to screw the little guy out of his ability to sell comics, because that doesn't make any sense. Everybody in the room's job is dependent upon selling comics. So it's just that they didn't understand or didn't realize it, or haven't had to do the barcode scan or try to teach somebody how to scan those things. And there's also, of course, a variety of the ways that people display things. So if you polled 5 comic retailers on how they display their new comics, you're going to get 10 different answers. And so not everybody does the waterfall, and some do completely facing out, and some have them in the boxes, and some, like you say, just toss them on a table. So it's hard to get a consensus. It would be difficult to get a consensus from 5 comic retailers whether the sun is coming up tomorrow. Because at least, there's going to be at least one who's going to, well, actually, the sun doesn't come up. The earth rotates in a direction to make it appear that it is coming up.
Right.
And then one's going to say, something completely different. So, and I love them, and they're, not wrong, never wrong. We're never wrong. So
Joe, I have a couple questions. Speaking on that, and just how a retailer or your LCS kind of treats their stock, right? I wonder about how many times you've heard the story of, hey, you know what? You've got so many comics, Freddie. You should open a comic book store, and you start there.
Yeah, a lot of guys started with their collection or something.
Right. And that was the way to go in the 70s, and you could probably get away with it in the early 80s. But there came a point where, when comic shops first started, back issues were more important because they were hard to find and everything, and you could get away with that. Then it became, the new ongoing regular periodicals, which was the bread and butter. And there was a brief period there where back issues really weren't anything at all, because people who were reading comics had been reading them so long that the stuff that they already had everything that they sort of needed. There was nothing recently. And a lot of comic shops back issue stock is what I call recycled gray stock. So I have my new books, they're out on the new releases. And then after they've had their 2 weeks worth in 2 weeks in the sun, because unfortunately now new periodical comics, for the most part, I'd say more than 90% of them have the shelf life of drugstore milk. Have you ever noticed when you buy milk from the drugstore, it always expires a week before the date that it says it's going to expire? Like, you bring it home, crack it open, it's already yogurt. So
here's your kernel. Would you like a little kernel in your coffee?
Yeah. So a lot of back issues just ended up being whatever was still up on the wall after 3 months and you took it down. Well, there's a reason why that didn't sell the first time. So in your back issue bins, it's going to take a while. And then eBay came along and things kind of picked up a little again on back issues, and back issues run in cycles like Pokemon cards and everything. And right now we're in a whole nother wave of it again, and it's excellent. And our back issue sales are 400% of what they were 2 or 3 years ago.
Now, why is that? Is that because there's a wave of young readers who are coming in, deciding that they want to get these old? Because that's the way it used to be, right? When we all started, you bought an issue of something, you found out there was a local comic book store, like I did in Ann Arbor, the Eye of Agamotto, and then you would go like, oh, I can buy these back issues, right? And
I love Eye of Agamotto. It's our favorite name.
And you're
I love that too. Yeah.
But
the only thing would have been better if it was called the Hoary Host of Hogarth,
and Norm was a great guy. He was a great retailer, very helpful to me, and very supportive. But then, and I've talked about this before, I always felt that basically you had, the comics would come out on Wednesday, and then you had Saturday. And most of the comics that are going to sell between Wednesday and Saturday. And after that, like the curdling happens pretty quickly. So you have to be very tight on what you order, or you got a lot of milk that is it ever going to be worth anything,
Right. Yep. A lot of great stuff. And I mean, we're in a period now, we're sort of coming out of a little bit because the Absolute and Ultimate books and the Energon universe books have been bringing people in. So we are seeing a lot of new faces again, and that's cool. It's great when all 2 or 3 of the big guys are firing and have something big, because that does actually create energy and bring people back. With back issues, but for the majority of everything on the B and C level, we're ordering tight. It's pretty much subscriptions, almost subscriptions only. So my new release. I'm hoping to get 90% sell through at the end of week 1, you know? And so, with back issues, there's actually in the comic retail industry, there's always talk, you need to diversify, you need to diversify, you need to diversify. And a lot of times you think that means, well, you need to start carrying games, or you need to carry this or some other kind of product. Shannon Lai from Bat City Comics in Florida, she mentions that you can diversify within a product line. So for back issues, you have like 5 different kinds of customers. You have people who are looking for high grade keys, you know, that are CGC graded. I don't deal in those. I don't really deal in any graded comics. But then we have the ones who just want keys. Then they want them raw. They either want them for their collection because they're kind of cool, or because I can turn them fast if they're raw, because then they have that little gamble aspect to it. Well, if I get this pressed and graded, and then I might be able to flip this or something or whatever and get it out there. I'm not a huge fan of grading, because you're turning amazing comics that smell amazing because they're old. You're turning those into coasters, you know. It makes sense for a coin. It makes sense for a stamp. It makes sense for a trading card, because you can still see everything. The only thing you've lost is the tactile ability. With a comic book, you're just turning it into a poster and an ad, you know. Right. So, you know, you've got those people searching for keys. And our last quarter, we had hardly any new collections come in. I got this amazing collection at the beginning of the year, refilled my cases. At the end of 2 weeks, gone. You know, all of that key stuff. And so you have those. Then you have people who are just looking to fill in gaps in their runs and collections. And nostalgia kind of goes in these 20-year waves. And over the last 10 or 15 years, comics really weren't designed with back issues in mind at all. Everything's a mini series. It's a jumping on point. 20 years ago, you still had 20 years ago, you would still be having issue 400 and something of X-Men. You had inertia that carried you on. You know, oh my God, Punisher's a Frankenstein right now. Dear God, this will go away at a moment. Or Chuck Austin's writing X-Men. He's going to stop writing it at some point. I don't want to hold in my collection, you know? So you would continue to collect. So we're at that 20-year point now where people are wanting to fill in some of those gaps. So stuff that I wouldn't think that I'd be able to sell 3 years ago, I put it out in the bins and it's moving. And then you have people who are looking for sets. So you have lots of bargain sets. And then we have our ones that start out at $2 and then go to $1 currently, because the Eagles won.
Go Birds.
Okay. Because the Eagles won, we currently have 26 for $10, you know, after the player, I don't know, Go Sports. I don't know what number, whoever, the guy who jumps backwards. So, you know, and then you have people who are just buying that stuff in huge quantities. So there's different markets within that.
And give us a feeling of, like, what is your customer base now? Like, what are the ages that you're seeing? Because I assume that most of the people that are direct market buyers are, I mean, when I go to the Comic-Con, everybody's got gray hair. They're getting gray. Like, my fans,
yes,
are getting gray, and those seem to be the people that I see on social media that don't like anything.
Right. Yeah. I joked when I was in the room when they announced the new DC and Marvel crossover team up thing that's going to be coming at the end of the year. And I was laughing. They announced no characters. They announced no creative teams. They announced no date when it was coming out. And I was certain that if I went onto the internet, people would be already complaining about who they're matching up, you know, without any information whatsoever. They were going to complain about the creators and the characters. So yes, there still is an aging cohort, which is still the majority. But it's actually very weird in the last couple years, the makeup of customers that come into the store has changed dramatically, because it used to be, as you said, Wednesday through Saturday, you're getting your weekly warriors coming in and picking up their, you know, subscriptions and all that kind of stuff. It's changed Mostly they're in on Wednesdays. That's pretty much it. And then very little on Thursday and some on Friday. For Thursdays and Fridays, it could change any, they're random. It could be, the butterfly flapping its wings in Brazil can totally affect whether I'm going to have a good sales day or not. Saturdays, which also used to be a fair number of weekly warriors, is not. It's all families and new faces. Every Saturday, I am seeing all kinds of people that I do not recognize and hardly any regulars.
Wow.
I don't know what's causing that. I wish I could figure that out, but it's happening, and I'm just going to run with it. So that's
are they looking for something in particular? Are they looking for Leon? What are they looking for?
It's hard to say. I mean, some of them are, bringing their kids in. We have a barbershop next door, and some of them come in, after getting a haircut or whatever. Some of them are looking for that. Our store is set up so when you first walk in, that's where it's designed to sort of look like a bookstore. So it's one of those things where 80% of our merchandising is geared toward 20% of our customers, because the 80% that the bread and butter customers, they know what they want is, and they can just head straight forward, and we don't have to do as much for that. Right. So when you walk into our store, the first thing you're going to be greeted in those first 6 feet are muggle friendly things that they're going to recognize, that it's not going to be a deep cut of some obscure superhero or things like that. I've got Princess Bride and Winnie the Pooh and Calvin and Hobbes. And, yes, all Pogs. Yes, it's Alf, and he's back in Pog form. Yeah. I have Jeff the Shark up. It's Jeff because he's popular because of the video game and things right now. Mad Libs and Sonic and stuff like that, so that they're familiar when they first walk in. And so that's bringing a fair amount of stuff. There are more cookbooks selling in comic shops now than you would believe.
Cookbooks?
Pop culture cookbooks. Our best-selling cookbooks are Bluey, Bob's Burgers, and How to Make Ramen, which is a graphic novel from I think 10 Speed Press.
Yeah. Oh, I think Robin says How to Make Ramen.
No, it's How to Make Ramen. and so the mix is changing. Godzilla is incredibly hot right now, and he kind of transcends all manners of ages and stuff. I don't know if you said that before we started or during your light banter section, Mike, when you were saying Star Wars is where geek culture began. And since, and then that begat Transformers and G.I. Joe and all of those things, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and all of those has continued to be around long enough that they are multi-generational. There is a version of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles from everybody from my age to a toddler practically at this point. So I don't remember what I was going to say, but that's how a bill becomes a law.
So I
lost my thread there.
So Joe, I have a series of questions, and these can be short. So we started talking about just how you design a shop. Already, I've been giving you your flowers all night already, but I would, no disrespect to your consortium, but I don't know how many people think of that stuff off the bat. We've all been in shops that have their flavor is someone's basement. You know what I mean? It's just like, oh, this place is great. You just like step on stuff and maybe you could buy it if it's not, and then you have like really curated spaces. So my question I wanted to ask you real quick is about racking things. When you get things in that are super oversized, like those super editions, those IDW books and things like that, how much of a problem is that stuff for you? Because I mean, it's really great to see, but how do you put that stuff out?
That I don't. I generally speaking pretty much make that almost subs only for that, or wait till it goes on deep sale and then have it a blowout at Christmas for it. That is another one of the creative versus functional retail problems. Distillery and Black Label from DC and all those things in that magazine size format, it's difficult. The racks aren't designed for it. Comic boxes aren't designed for them. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles The Last Ronin has to be a magazine size board cut down to a golden size bag in order for you to bag and board it. So there is resistance to it, and as I said, with all comic retailers, some people do fantastic with it, especially if you're kind of like an art store that kind of, you know, a store that curates based on art. You know, that may do fantastic with it, but there's somebody needs to make nerd furniture for a lot of those oversized things and those omnibuses, because when you get those artist editions, you need like a big lectern that you could put it on to read from the to read from the first book of Ditko, or, you know, the Gospel according to Adams, or whatever it is. And then you need some place to store it. So that's what you need underneath the lectern. You just slide the books in so they can stand up.
You need a very sturdy bookshelf, I can tell you.
Exactly.
Because I have a bunch of them.
And you also need to be putting those bookshelves on the concrete floor, not on the second floor, where you start to see a gap form between the bottom. I had that happen on my bookshelves with trade paperbacks, and I'm going, wait a minute, is there starting to be a gap that's starting to form between the floor and the baseboards? So it depends. I mean, you need to have flexibility in your racking. Yes. Yeah. Chip Zdarsky, I don't know if you guys have seen Chip Zdarsky News that comes out regularly, Zdarsky Comic News. And one of his upcoming things, he's talking about, you know, he has these great headlines on there, and one's about Omnibuy and how they just crush your junk. You cannot read them in bed. So they're just ridiculously huge. So it varies. I mean, you definitely have to curate and figure out how you're gonna write that stuff, and it does present a challenge. And it is just another straw sometimes thrown onto a retailer's day, where like, I like this book, but it's a pain in the butt. I don't have the mental energy today to figure out how I'm going to rack this particular title.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because one of the things that probably is very different in a comic book store rather than a bookstore. Bookstores are used to all kinds of different shapes and sizes, and, you know, comics is everything is like, it's got to fit in the box, got to fit in the bag, got to, you know,
right.
And so sort of my this always creates a question that if comic books are that formatted, and everything is very formatted, and we have to have the box, it's almost like you could have a comic book store that was like a McDonald's, where like everything in a McDonald's fits in a McDonald's. It's like it's like a modular build out, like everything fits. You know, they don't bring something into a McDonald's that's not going to fit into a. They don't make a product that like, oh,
right.
Like, how are we gonna, you know, how are we gonna do it? So if comic book stores were more like franchises in the way that they were laid out, like what you're talking about, like laying out your store in a very logical way to draw the general public in, and then the deep cuts in the back, like, you know, the guy who's like wants to buy a 1940s Black Hawk comic knows, you know, where to go in the store, right? But the average, I'm very interested in the average person coming in. Your Saturday customers, are they, what percentage are families? What percentage are teenagers? And how does that break down? Are they mostly girls, like the old Borders? We used to have what I call the Borders girls, who used to go into Borders and sit on the floor and read the manga. You know, they didn't buy it, but they could go in and read it. So I'm sort of really interested in that, because I always felt that like one of the flaws was that they still assumed that there were 10-year-old boys walking in huge numbers like there were in the old days.
With propeller beanies? Is that
you know, and like, you know, with their
slingshots in their back pockets.
Right, yeah. You know, Opie's coming in with Will Robinson to buy comics, and, you know, that probably hasn't been around since I was a kid.
Well, the mix is, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it is not as often teenage boys. Actually, teenage boys are the ones we're looking at most distrustfully when they come in, you know. But it's across the whole spectrum, and I mean that in pretty much almost every kind of meaning that word has at the moment. Because like we have a pride section, and there's lots of people who just gravitate to that right away and look at that stuff. There's manga readers that are coming in. There are a lot of parents trying to find stuff for their kids.
The birthday, is it the birthday party pickup?
Sometimes it's a birthday party pickup, but I mean, we're selling all kinds of crazy stuff right now. And so I can't say our customers are becoming way more diverse in almost every every measure that you could possibly have at this point. There are times where I am, the store's pretty full and I am the minority. I'm a white guy in the comic shop and I am definitely the minority here, and which is fascinating as well, both in gender and race and sexual inclination, and so that's cool, and that is so much fun to actually get these different perspectives coming on it. And we always try, when we're hiring, to try to make sure that there are people who don't look like me working at the store, who have a completely different opinion. There needs to be, if you're over 35 and you don't have somebody under 35 advising you, you're an idiot, to give you kind of a different perspective. But it is all manners. And there's people who come in here, I'm just like baffled, like, why are you here? Not when they come up and talk and we finally have a conversation with or something, and whatever they buy, okay, this makes perfect sense. But when you first see them, you're just like, okay, are you lost? Are you in the wrong place? But they're all interested. They're all hearing about it in different places, and that's why we have a whole bunch of different flavors. That's why there's vanilla and French vanilla, because it takes all kinds.
Joe, I wanted to touch on that real quick. And Big Joe in the chat had mentioned having really great staff. That's a really big part of this. And I also wanted to mention location. Right? This is a business. So thinking about the triangulation of like where your store is, which is close to a college campus, which I want to assume most of your customers aren't really the college kids.
Correct.
Right? So, right? One would think, but it's a really interesting area you're in. And I was talking to one of the shop guys in my area, and there's kind of like a book desert. And I'm sure that's happening all over the country, where the Barnes and Nobles are gone, right? So the comic shop is still standing, and now they have to change their system or change their racks, because now they're getting manga in, because all the kids would go to the Barnes and Noble to get manga, and there's no other place to get it now. So I'm wondering, how does that affect your shop too? Like, do you have casual book readers who just like, oh, this looks interesting? Do you have like normal books in here, or like what's the makeup because of where your store is?
Well, where our store is, and it's been for 40 years, is still a little bit problematic because we're set back from Main Street, and there's nowhere in Delaware that's really just a destination to kind of wander around in.
Right.
So we had somebody in today. So I've been driving up and down Main Street. Well, only one direction in Main Street for 10 years here, and I never saw the comic sign until today. Like, damn it. But I want to make a giant, like a Legion of Superheroes clubhouse rocket stick out of the top of the building or something, to just really catch eyes. But our mix is definitely changing. We have thrown more novels into the mix. I can't keep John Scalzi novels in at the moment. He did Red Shirts, Kaiju Preservation Society, Starter Villains. They're all kind of adjacent. We benefit from being in a state of mind around here where they do want to champion the little guy and they do want to support the local guy. And so people do kind of come in to look for that. And so, we can order regular novels because we've had to evolve to be able to go just beyond Diamond as a distributor.
Mm-hmm.
So people still want the online is a terrible place to try to find something new because you can't browse on Amazon or something. You just, whatever the algorithm's going to feed you. And if you notice, that algorithm is always sponsored anymore.
Oh,
And so, so you're not going to find that goofy little thing or that weird little thing. And in comic shops, at their best, are tomorrow's next big thing today. They were always just one little step ahead of mainstream pop culture. And that you would find, we had Walking Dead before Walking Dead went crazy, and we had the Marvel stuff before the Marvel movies broke, and all of those things. And so that's what we're trying to get ahead of at the moment. Like, the whole world knows it's Jeff the Land Shark right now from the Rivals game. Well, we knew who Jeff was a little bit before that. And so it's again, I've lost that train of thought. It went off the rails.
I think in the old days, very often was the comic book shops, and what they sold was a reflection of the owner's taste.
Exactly.
Right. So the owner, like, the parody they do on The Simpsons, was like, that guy liked Wolverine. That's what he was going to sell, was Wolverine. And if you came in and you were looking for something that wasn't Wolverine. And I actually experienced that when I started self-publishing, because I got a list of retailers. And this is back before, when you still had, you had Diamond, and then you had
Capital City.
Right, yeah. And you had two kinds of retailers. A retailer who would order a book like mine,
Action Planet,
right, about like 10%, and then you had 90% who would, like, if it wasn't Wolverine, I'm not ordering it. And a lot of those shops, I heard, were, this like weird guy. They weren't really good businessmen. They would be like the kind of person like, I'm lactose intolerant. I have a store that sells a supermarket. We have no dairy.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm allergic to dairy. No one else would ever be able to get dairy. So what percentage of have those people all been kind of cleaned out by now? I mean, if they're,
ComicsPro did a survey, an industry survey, to try to figure out what the average comic shop looks like. And of course, what they found out was there is no average comic shop. But what they did find out is that the majority of comic shop owners are over 50. So there is some aging out of that. There were a surprising number of them that were one-person operations.
Wow.
Yeah. So there are still people who are kind of passion projecting it. So some of those are your Android's dungeons, maybe. But some of those are just a small community place, a very scrappy little independent bookstore, except that they deal in comics. They're, how well that they are going to be able to weather some of these changes and everything, because there are definitely advantages to an economy of scale. We're definitely a mid-range size store, and even at mid-range, sometimes it's difficult to order to hit minimums from some of the alternate vendors like HarperCollins or Hachette or Scholastic sometimes. And so, if you're certain size, it is difficult for you to tap into that to be able to get those kinds of
Why
things.
don't you break that down a little bit for the viewers at home? What the minimums? We know what that means.
Right. So with Penguin Random House, it's fantastic because you can order one copy of a comic and it'll get shipped to you for free. You know, you may have lost some discount points from where you were at Diamond, but you're not paying shipping costs, and you can order whatever you need as fast as you need it. Okay. When you get to other distributors like Scholastic, you need, in order to get free freight, you need to order at least 15 books or something, and it can be a combination of front list, which are books that have not come out yet, or backlist, you know, stuff that's already been out. When you want to try to order from HarperCollins, well, you need to have 30 books, and you might only, you know, the main thing, HarperCollins doesn't offer as many titles that I would be interested in. And the main thing I get from them is a $40 hardcover of Princess Bride. I don't want to order 30 copies of the Princess Bride in one shot. So it's harder for me to get enough critical mass to place an order for that. And so if you were ordering manga from Yen Press and you're doing it through Diamond, you have not gotten any manga from Yen Press for 6 to 8 months, because Diamond was having trouble with Hachette. And so now they're putting stuff on final order cutoff that's been out for 3 months, and they're making it look like it's brand new. So if your only source was Diamond, you're cut off from this, and your customers could potentially be buying it elsewhere because they're seeing it's been out on the shelf. A store my size, you know, which can't put together a Hachette order all the time because they have some very peculiar rules. And if you don't hit it just right, my wholesale discount from Hachette would be 0 if I happen to miss, if I don't have the right number of books and the right mix of books in my order, you know, where normally it would be, you know, much better than that. So I'm large enough that I can, you know, achieve some of these minimums, so that way I get a better discount rate and I get free shipping and I get the stuff earlier than if I just had to go through it through Diamond. And so the smaller shops, you know, don't necessarily have that luxury, but they have, you know, other methods of doing it. Some of them get sub-distributed from other comic shops and things. So it's hard to say exactly how many are that size, but it was a surprising amount. We do believe there was a little bit of dirty data because there were some multi store owners who were saying that they only had one employee, but they had multiple stores. I'm like, okay, the math on that one doesn't quite work out. You know, unless you are, you know, three kids wearing a trench coat, stacked up wearing a trench coat, there's no way you're going to be able to run this.
One's open on Mondays, one's open on Tuesdays.
Yeah, exactly. And also, Joe, because of the size of your store, maybe, you know, just your spot in the business, not every retailer has accounts with all of these people.
No, that's correct.
Right, because I've been in a million stores where they're like, "Oh, we don't have a Scholastic account," you know. So, or you know, so I think also what will be interesting to the layman comic shop person is that it's not so simple to get things at the shop.
It is not. It is not. I mean, right now, you know, stuff from Diamond is a little bit tricky at the moment. They're kind of working okay, but my Diamond orders, my last week's Diamond shipment arrived in an envelope. That's how much stuff I got from it, down from the boxes. I mean, it was in an envelope because UPS had trashed the box and they had to repackage it. But still, the fact that it could fit in an envelope was, you know, disheartening. I'm not happy to see any of the, you know, bad things that are happening to Diamond. They have propped this industry up for 40 some odd years, and a lot of stores continue to exist because of Diamond's largesse. It's just that, unfortunately, when you end up with a system where there's really only one source, there's not tremendous motivation for that source to innovate and keep up with the way that they should. And so some of that ended up, you know, biting them in the butt. And then their decision to close for a few months during COVID, which I backed 100%. We would not still be here if stuff was continued to come in during that time, you know, where we just gave us the opportunity.
You would have eaten all that.
Exactly. We would not have been able to get it out the door fast enough. And so it enabled us to thin down our stock, finally get all of our, subscribers stuff almost cleaned down and everything. And we reordered what we needed from Penguin Random House or Diamond if it's stuff that we needed. So I wholeheartedly support that decision, but that was just the domino that got tipped over first to, make all the rest of their sins sort of come to the forefront and make it collapse. So yes, most things boil down to roughly the 80-20 rule. It is probably 20% of your comic shops that might be moving 80% of the material. And when you're self-publishing, 10 or 20% of your shops are going to be the ones who are going to be motivated to carry your work or do it. And so as a creator, it's got to be very difficult to try to figure out what are these engaged shops. I don't want to have to cold call everybody.
Right.
I'm going to do a little brag here at the moment and say that your ComicsPro stores tend to be your more engaged ones, and that have the multiple accounts and things like that, because they've been studying this and talking about this for 20 some odd years. So if you are a creator and you wanted to reach out, I would go to the ComicsPro website and start with that list first to try to get a chance to find stores that are more willing to listen. And I do, as a retailer, if you are in the back section of previews, you're just peeing in the wind. You know what I mean? You're not there. You just have this tiny little listing amongst all this stuff. And even that would be Random House and Scholastic and HarperCollins. HarperCollins makes a great line of graphic novels called Harper Alley. Most retailers never see them because it's just a little line that they're flipping through after they've gone through the drudge of everything else. So that's another thing where these publishers who are trying to get into the comic market with previews going away, well, now they're going to have to be reaching out more directly and finding new ways to get that information to comic retailers. I saw briefly, I know I wasn't supposed to check in the comments thing.
We have a lot of questions waiting for you.
But Tom Zoller, who this logo was a variation that he did for us off of a John Gallagher logo. It was asking about Kickstarters and how those.
Well, we'll just pull the question up so you don't have to.
We earmarked that one to come back to.
Go ahead, Steve, if you want to pull it up.
Will do.
And Joe, how you feeling? You good?
I'm good. I'm good.
All right. Cool.
So Tom's question from YouTube, and Tom Zoller, check out his work. He's fantastic. How does Kickstarter affect comic shop sales? Like when I Kickstart a book to print it for super fans and then have stock to sell, am I cannibalizing those sales? Like, how do you feel as a retailer?
So this is a very divisive question amongst retailers. I am more of the model of the opinion that Kickstarter is not necessarily a bad thing. It's a new model that we need in order to get projects, new and interesting projects out there that would not be able to be greenlit by the major publishers.
Sure.
So this is an opportunity for new voices. It's an opportunity for things like Love and Capes, which is one of my all-time favorite comics, Tom, to continue to exist after, whatever economics or whatever new corporation has bought whatever publisher and everything, and they've cut back on all this stuff. So yes, the Kickstarters, the product is often just beautiful. I know Rocket Ship does a lot of that stuff, and the production value on those things are amazing. So it does cannibalize some of your top tier, buyers or whatever like that, if you had hardcore fans on it. But through some of Tom's Kickstarters in this example, we have created an audience of Zoller fans. So when a new thing comes out, I do have, I know I could sell this number of copies to some people. There should always be a retailer tier in every Kickstarter so that we can get stock in at a reasonable price, and usually it's almost a similar discount to what it would be if we were buying from a distributor, or that you have a mechanism that we can buy it from you later on if we need to restock. So I just see Kickstarter as a new distribution channel. It can cannibalize a little bit of sales, but if you're cagey, you know what is and isn't going to. If you only have one guy who's really into a particular title, then I wouldn't buy the Kickstarter copy of it, because that person's going to overspend on it on Kickstarter supporting it. Excuse me one sec.
Yeah. So Joe, I have a question for you about that. Because I've listened to some people talk about their kind of retailer tiers and their Kickstarters, and some people are like, yeah, man, nobody touches it. So is that a matter of that they haven't let you know that they're doing it? Like, what is someone who's running a campaign supposed to do to get these stores to know that they have it?
Well, I mean, it's just like there's so many of them, it's impossible for us to know of. And that's again why the importance of having excuse me, relationships with comic stores and comic creators. Whenever Steve has a Kickstarter out there, I am aware of it. Whenever Tom has one, I am aware of it. I think whenever Jimmy Palmiotti has one, I'm aware of it. Unfortunately, when Jeff Smith had one, we did fine with the Jeff Smith Kickstarter. But sometimes the Kickstarters can bite you in the butt. Like, we ordered 10 copies of the Good Omens graphic novel that's coming out. And now, unfortunately, even though he's not getting any money from it at all, and they've announced that he's not getting any money, and Colleen Dorn's artwork is amazing, and Terry Pratchett is one of my all-time favorite writers, now I might be a little bit stuck. With those books. So that is part of the problem of the downside of it. But Kickstarters also let us reprint stuff that was never going to get reprinted. David Michelinie's Boz Chronicles, or something very weird or obscure like that. So I think it's just another distribution channel, and you have to curate your cold call list to figure out who might be able to find that 20% that's going to move 80% of the product for you.
So now, would that be something that your group would help with? Like, if you contacted your retail group, would they say, we think that these are the stores that fit this kind of a book? These are the stores that would buy a Boz Chronicles.
I don't know if we can get down to that sort of granular level to give that kind of an answer, but we do different webinars and things throughout the year. Or if you have some sort of special deals or anything, you could always send it to us, and we could see if we can disseminate it amongst our amongst our retailer list. So we could potentially do something like that. I can't say that for certain, and I got to put the little asterisk there. Not all opinions expressed by Joe Murray are necessarily those of ComicsPro, but yeah, I mean, ComicsPro would be a good place to start. There were a number of Rocket Ship was at the meeting. Lots of little smaller press guys, Battle Quest, SHP, Amp Comics, all of these sort of new startups and everything were there. And so majority of the books that they're going to sell are going to probably be through the ComicsPro connections that they made there, and one or two local stores local to them, which they happen to hit with and have a good relationship with. So ComicsPro is not a bad place to reach out to say, hey, we have this. Can you, pass this information along? We're still trying to figure out some of that stuff because we're in a bit of a reorganization at the moment, but it's not a bad place to start. You can go to the ComicsPro website, which keeps popping back up, and it will, ComicsPro. Actually, it's basically comicspro.org is what works. Okay. And it will, there's the thing by state, and you could sort of look at it and get that information.
Joe, so a lot of people every once in a while, and we got a ton of questions. But I don't want to derail this too much. But a lot of people are down on floppies, 32-page floppy comics. Every
We're
once in a
down
while,
on the word floppy at this store. We do not let you use the word floppy. We call
Really?
them periodicals. We will
Oh.
call them periodicals, but we're not a fan of floppies. Okay, go ahead.
All right. So periodicals. Are you bullish on that format?
It's still doing well. I mean, our sales for the beginning for this year are up across all levels, including periodicals. So I think that there's still life in the I think there's still a life in them as a format, because there is a certain comfort in the routine of coming and picking them up each week, that you know that they're going to be there. There's going to be something new. And I will be the first to admit that when people go up to the new comic rack, they already have in hand what they're going to buy, because they've already subscribed to them. And they're going to sit, but they're going to enjoy browsing through the other books. You know, I would say for every 10 or 15 comics sold, 1 or 2 are read off the rack while they're there, while people are sort of browsing to kind of to follow up on them. So I believe that there is still a great amount of joy and life in floppies. They might get a little tight if the tariff costs do jack prices up on things, right. But I think that there's still, and then that just will lead us to more sales in cheap back issues, you know, potentially. So,
all right. Thanks, Joe. All right, I have 1/1.5 more questions, and then I want Steve to try to hit these questions, and then we're going to get you out of here, Joe.
Oh, no, I'm in no rush. I don't
want you to melt on camera. So.
I'm fine. The problem is not getting me to talk, to public speak. The problem is trying to get me to shut the hell up. That's where your problem is. So I hope one of you guys got a kill switch.
So all right. So here's my one question, and then I have one about kids in the store. So I keep putting this on the screen. Come get your polls for.
I pulled it.
For the majority of shops, the subscription box is really crucial to your store, right? So your regulars come in, they want anything that has Green Lantern in it, or they want this, that, and the other. But then I've seen over the past couple of years the shame stack that retailers have been posting online, like, look, this is $5,000 worth of comics that people haven't picked up. How are you dealing with that, or even in your shop, or do you have some systems in place to make sure that you don't get stuck with these?
You lock the door when the guy comes in. Click, click.
Well, it's a multi-tiered approach. First approach is 75 milligrams of Zoloft every day. Second, it is just as there is curation of the stuff on your shelves, you also have to kind of curate your subscription bins, and you have to stay on top of that. The sad truth is that every subscriber you have, no matter how loyal they seem, or no matter how long that they've been with you, at some point is probably just going to leave at some point, because of nothing we fear more than when a person who comes in and buys a whole ton of books each week comes in and goes, yeah, I'm getting married. And we're like, oh God, that sucks.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I'm buying a house. Oh, my wife's pregnant. Okay, well, I guess my kids are going to have to pour the water through the same chicken for a little bit longer, you know. So
making soup with a boot.
Yeah, I have this great picture whenever I'm really trying to give them the sad sack thing of a little kid who's like, I don't know, 8 years old, working in a coal mine. You know, but there are, in a lot of the point of sale systems that come out right now, your Managed Comics, your comic shop assistant, we use Comic Hub. There are tools in there, or Moby, which used to come before. There are tools in there that let you know this person hasn't been at this point, hasn't been in this long. So you need to have a policy in place that says, you know, if you have pickup once a month, at 3 weeks you get the warning, at 5 weeks you get, you know, maybe one more warning, and then you're cut off. until you've cleared out, and then if you haven't been in by this point, you're cut. And so there is two things that retailers believe their gut or their heart about more than they do about the data is discounting new books. Well, three things: giving away free bags and boards, and letting people slide on their subscriptions. So if you discount, if you give a 10% discount, you've got to sell 13 books to make the same money as you would if you sold 10 at regular price. Is that person going to be adding 3 more books onto their pile every single time? Odds are no. You could do a reward system that would make those numbers better and work better for you, or you have to bite the bullet and say, if you're offering a 20% discount, you got to sell 16 comics for in place of instead of 10 in order to make the same amount of money. And so when you look at those numbers, that's rough, and you feel like you're going to lose customers. Well, if you're giving a 20% discount, you can lose 25% of your customers. And if you're charging 5% or you're not offering discount, you're going to make the same amount of profit. You're not going to lose 25% of your customers. With the letting people slide, the voodoo answer to this is if that person hasn't been in you've in weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, and you've contacted them and you've contacted them and you've contacted them and you've contacted them, they are not going to come in until one day after you cut their books and put them away on the shelf. And then you have to spend all this time recreating it every single freaking time. Okay. So just cut them earlier and then they'll show up. But if you wait 7 weeks, right? And you're like, oh, I'll wait another week. You could wait 6 months. They will show up one day after you cut it and have to recreate all of the work. Okay. That is a weird little truth of the matter, but you're not doing yourself any favors sitting on unsold inventory. It is just becoming an expensive paperweight. It's the same thing when people have storage units. I've got this furniture, this lawn furniture we might use at some point. You're buying that furniture over and over and over again by paying rent on it all the time. Right. Yes, exactly. So it is. So that is. It feels wrong, but you have to look at the numbers and say, I can't afford to do this. It's better for me to have these books on the shelf. It's all about cash flow. You know what I mean?
So, Joe, I've also heard when people have, been in the Facebook comments trying to fix that, people say like, oh, well, can't you just take their credit card down and charge them? And then there seems like there could be some like fraudulent parts of that.
There are downsides to that. There's all kinds of compliance things on that. It's problematic, but systems are trying to come in to work on that. Comic Hub is doing a thing where you'll be able to prepay for your comics. So certain customers, we could just say, you got to prepay for everything.
That makes sense.
It does. It is.
Unless it doesn't come out.
it's a raw. I am not going to be the first canary in the coal mine on that deal. Okay. Yeah. I think that there's different ways that it can be done. So yes, that there is some degree of that's being built in. It just means it has to be some system where we are not the ones in possession of the credit card numbers. That becomes a whole different thing. And then if there's any kind of breaches, you're in all kinds of problems for that. And as the little guy, you're the one who's going to get screwed on it, not like, say, a government who just gave all of your information from all of your possible sources to somebody who has no right to see it.
You know what it reminds me of a little bit is when I was a kid and I had a paper route and everybody wanted the paper. And then when you would go weekly to, you go to collect your
want your $2?
Yeah. you would see the light go out and the TV would turn off.
Yep.
Right? As soon as you're knocking on the door, you don't hear anything, and then if you canceled them, they get pissed off at you because hey,
right.
You know what happened to my newspaper?
Comic shops want to be in a perfect world. Comic shops want to be in the business of selling comics. We are unfortunately a lot of us in the business of providing unsecured lines of credit for people who think they want to buy comics. You know what I mean? That's what we're doing. To go back to the curdled milk thing, if you had a roommate who works weird hours and he says, "Can you pick up groceries for me?" And you keep, so you buy him milk and all of this stuff, and he doesn't get around to drinking the milk until after wanting to drink the milk after it's gone sour. And he's like, "Well, I don't want this anymore. It's sour." I'm like, "It wasn't sour when I bought it for you," So, again, they think, "Oh, well, you can just put the books out and sell them." No, I have already ordered what I know I can sell. So whatever you have in that stack, I cannot sell 6 weeks after it's come out. I can pull a half dozen books out of it and maybe sell it, but the rest are going, I'm stuck with.
So it sounds like basically what half your time is spent. You've got to be like an accountant. You really have to stay on top of, your cash flow. It's not just one thing. It's, you got to account for this, got to account for that. And now you have multiple distributors that you're dealing with. So it's not just one big giant gorilla.
I'm going to share a very secret thing about comic retailing to you, Mike. Are you ready for this?
Okay.
I don't get to spend all my time at the comic shop sitting behind the counter reading comics. I never have time to sit behind the counter and read comics. That is not the job. Just as artists, I imagine, you want to spend time at the drawing board. You have to spend 90% of your time pimping your stuff out and doing all of these other things, and you only get to spend 10% of your time at the drawing board. And it's the same with comic retailers. Hit me with some questions.
Let's do it. It's question palooza time.
All right, we got another one just snuck in there. I've been trying to. All right, I think Dom is going to be our VIP from the YouTube. Variants excluded. Do you think a cover sells a comic?
Not as much as it used to. I actually, you know what? I can't answer this question that well because I am so far removed from myself looking at comics anymore. I don't really get a chance to do it, so I'm not quite in the mind of a regular comic buyer to figure out if that's what does it. A cool cover certainly can help. When they came out with that great, amazing Spider-Man one, which was sort of like the webs, it was like a black cover with all the his face was made up of webs and everything. That's very cool. Some of the negative space versions that they've come out with, occasionally, yes, but on the whole, the covers are pretty generic, as we said before. There's no, how many times can you have Wolverine standing next to a motorcycle and expect that to be, that's going to move the title this month? So.
That's right. All right. Let's keep them going. It's a lightning round.
We got America's Tom Zoller on the YouTube.
Yes.
Question about and what else can I do to promote the book? I know Tony Fleeks has a Madman Sales traveling show. Aside from quality, of course. I think that was a part of that question.
We've recently had a tremendous amount of success with having a signed wall of stuff. So I've got John Gallagher's Max Meows. I've got Jamar's Leon's up there signed. We had Peter Tomasi here, and he ended up signing some extra books. Kami Garcia sent us a bunch of these like little strips that have her autograph on them, so we just stick them in all of those Teen Titan books. I ordered some Scary Godmothers with book plates. So sometimes just sending book plates or signatures or something along with it to let us put in the book, and that gives us an excuse to sort of talk about the book. Hey, it's over here. This is a specially curated section, and also give us a log line for it. We're having much more success with we're selling the daylights out of Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees, because I just have a little sign that says Captain Blue Hen recommends. This is Paddington meets Dexter. Boom.
Wow.
And that gets them to pick it up. And so with Tom, it's easy because I'll try to promote his stuff all day long because I love it. But if you just have to try to get a relationship with the retailers on it, and I will always take a cold call if I can from a creator to pitch me about their book, because you're making the effort. If you believe in the product, that gives me more reason to believe in the product.
And so those Kickstarter tiers, those books should be signed.
Yeah, that doesn't hurt. And again, if you can't sign the books for to get them out because of logistical reasons, just send us some book plates. So yeah. All
Thanks
right.
for the question, Tom. You're a national treasure.
And tall.
Henry on YouTube. What's your one piece of advice for shoppers to help out comic shops?
Drag someone along with you. Because if it's a good comic shop, they're going to find something that they're going to like. If there's something completely different, you need to break. We want to make sure that Stuart off of Big Bang Theory and the comic shop guy are not what everybody thinks comic shops are, that there's more to them than they think. And that is kind of fun. And, the conversations that you're going to hear or whatever, but only you drag them to a good comic shop that you believe in.
That's great. Yeah. You don't want to be a bad first experience.
Exactly.
Tim Fielder. Hello, Tim, on Facebook in Clarksdale.
Oops, sorry.
That's all right.
Sorry. Kick it back. Sorry.
Clarksdale, and huge swaths of rural and suburban America went for decades without local comic shops. How can the industry come back from that?
That is a big question and possibly above my pay grade, but you sort of need to create a need, and that can be done with working with local libraries. There should still be libraries around everywhere, and a library can be a place where you can start to talk to them about possibly carrying comics or graphic novels. You can start a comic book club or something. There are mail order, comic services, which by saying that aloud, I know a bunch of comic retailers around the world just started, shaking their little things to get the evil eye on me. But, those exist to kind of fill in those gaps. So what you sort of need to do is try a pop-up. If you're motivated to do it, is to try a pop-up one at make a little local comic show at your library or at a school or something like that, and try to build a little bit of interest in it. And then, exactly. Partner with another business space to sell it, at a coffee shop or another bookstore or, for God's sakes, a tattoo shop. There's a place, sell them at music things or wrestling shows or something like that. You're going to need to create a little bit of a market and a little bit of demand, and then you can try to do it small and then see, what you can do. So partnering is a good plan. I ought to hire that guy.
Robert Alvarez. Hello, Robert, on YouTube. Are seniors buying comics?
Yes. There's two types of seniors who are buying comics. The ones who have been reading comics for all those years and have aged up with them. Been reading the X-Men for 50 years. And then grandparents buying comics for their kids. That is one of the big audiences, new audiences there. Kristen McClenn from Circana, she does these amazing presentations on us on what's selling and what's not selling and what are the different cohorts that are buying this and everything. That there is so much grandparent buying right now. That so many grandparents.
Boomer grandparents?
I don't know. They don't all wear hats. So I can't tell. I don't know if they're all. It's hard for me to say because theoretically I'm of grandparent age, except I got started late because they sell comics, and so I don't know. It's just a lot of grandparents are having to raise the kids or take care of the grandkids or whatever, or take them around, and so they do still value reading. Over electronics and stuff. So that is kind of the reason they sort of bring them here. to try to do that stuff and to, get some advice and some curation and to find stuff that they think the kids might like. Now the kid's always going to try to go for whatever is plushy, plastic, or makes noise or comes with a Pokemon on it. But you can still try to get them to read something, and they're very grateful, and for your help and for still existing, because they're still very much in an analog world, and they kind of want to share analog joy with their digital grandchildren.
My grandson likes to kill animals. You got any Dexter comics?
Well, I do happen to have Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees, and that's Paddington killing Dexter.
Thank you for the question, Robert. Dom, again, MVP. How much more foot traffic do you expect when the new Marvel DC crossover drops later this year?
I expect there to be a fair amount of it, because Marvel and DC have really primed the pump with the Absolute and Ultimate lines. Those have been bringing people back in, and it has been 20 years, and we say all of your nostalgia goes in 20-year cycles.
Yeah.
That, yes, I think it will definitely bring people back in. Our question of the week last week was, since they have not announced what characters, was who do you want to see, teamed up or fighting or crossed over? My first thought was Jeff the Land Shark and Crypto, since both of them are hot right now. But the winner was Black Canary and Black Widow. Yeah. So, but we wanted to see also Hector Hammond and MODOK. We want to see the battle of the big heads. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you for the question, Dom. Coming down the last.
But yes, I definitely think it's going to bring some people in. That's an event that will bring people in. Yes.
America's JRD on YouTube says, Joe, do you have customers who are hypercritical about book quality, who check every book in your shipment to make sure they get pristine books?
We don't let them check every book in the shipment. We have maybe 3 who would fall under that, but that is also a question of curation of the attitude of your store, the personality of your store. That's not something that we particularly promote. And so we kind of try to curb that a little bit, but it depends on what customer base you're catering to. As I said, there's a diversity of comic book buyers, and there are some who are into that. But that's a very difficult thing to do, because the number of people who handle a comic, that any comic comes in decent shape, is a freaking miracle.
Right.
I've been to the printing press. I've been to the warehouses. I've been to the UPS distribution centers. That anything gets here intact is a miracle. And if every comic was a 9.8, then no comics are a 9.8. Right. So it just depends on how we will do our best, but from a practical standpoint, we do not have time to go through every book that we're pulling in order to get you the best copy of all those things. If you want to swap it for what's on the shelf, that's fine. But if you're going to keep bouncing comics after a point, I got to say, look, I can't make any guarantees. So you either prepay for what you're buying, or, unfortunately, we cannot help you in this respect.
They get sprayed with the water bottle.
Yes, exactly.
Does your organization have an estimate? Well, this is a sort of a 2-part question. What are the top selling or the average sales numbers of books? And 2, do you have an idea of approximately how many regular comic buying customers are in the direct market? And I separate the direct market from, like Scholastic and
right.
Comics and
no, because once DC left Diamond, all of the sales numbers got lost, because there's no. Okay, so part of the project that we talked about with ComicsPro with metadata and the Comet standard and trying to get all of this data together is to try to get in a format, because the publishers really do want to be able to have want to know how their sales are relative to everybody else. And there's no good method for that. There are still some, like ICV2 will tell you what the top 20 sales are, but that's just based on on 200 stores that have Comic Hub. Okay. And then there's something called Prana, which uses managed comics to make this sort of fan confidence index to find out how excited people are about a book. There is no uniform sales data for comics at present because comic shops, unlike bookstores, do not report their data to anybody. Comic Hub stores do report their stuff to BookScan and which is now I think called Circana. So they only get a portion. That's like 200 self-selecting stores who use that particular system. And all of the publishers really want us to be able to get that kind of data together. And that's something ComicsPro is trying to move towards, to be able to get this unified thing. So like the book market, we can have the kind of data that you're asking for. So as far as the number of readers or buyers, the individual point of sale systems like Managed Comics can tell you, all of the stores that use Managed Comics can tell you how many users they have and potentially how many discrete users they have and what they potentially bought in a anonymized way. Comic Hub can do that as well, and which is be like another 200 shops, but there's no unified thing for it at the moment.
So just can you guesstimate?
Let's see. More than I have fingers, but less than Musk has dollars.
Okay.
But no, beyond that, I don't know. It's hard. What the top selling books are,
Yeah.
it's hard to say also because they are getting grossly inflated by store variants. Like if you buy if you want to have a store exclusive cover from Marvel, you got to buy 5,000 copies. And, you know, yes. And I think in the past, you also had to buy 3,000 of the regular cover. So you're already inflating that number. So that is
so if you wanted that, you would have to buy
at least 5,000 copies.
And those were purchased through their distributor. So that was changing that was going toward their total, their credit.
Right, exactly. It goes through their total. And then even then, when you like Marvel, all of their SKUs, meaning the individual items with the individual barcodes,
right, yeah,
all have the same price. So like their foil covers for Doctor Strange of Asgard right now, if they had a foil cover for that, the foil cover should cost $10. The comic itself, the regular version of the comic, costs $4.99, but all of them will say $4.99 on them, even though $4.99 is, we would lose money if we sold the foil copy for $4.99.
Right.
They keep all of them the same price, so they can count all those titles in one. They'll count that as one title. So the total sales will include all versions of it. DC will have the regular cover version, and then their variants are $1 more because they have cardstock covers. When the numbers all came from Diamond, Supergirl A cover and Supergirl B through D covers would count as two separate items.
Right.
So your total Supergirl sales would be broken up. So it would be moving down to, that. So Marvel had this advantage where all their versions of a particular issue would count as one title, but other publishers, it would count as multiple titles. So that gave Marvel a little bit of a false advantage.
That's just such a crazy higgledy-piggledy way to have an industry where, it used to be what, IBC2?
ICV2.
Yeah, I used to give the numbers of, So people are basically sort of everybody's flying in the dark?
For the most part, yes. That is why, as much as painful as everything that's going on in the comic industry right now is, I feel that it's a necessary evolution that we're having to go through in order to move along. I know personally, I don't tend to evolve until, circumstances dictates I got to. I'm the cataclysm version of personal evolution.
The chrysalis stage only happens
right.
under the most
right.
severe conditions.
Exactly. So the book industry kind of did this evolution a number of years ago. But there also was you had more you had sort of fewer players, and now you have even fewer players, and they're bigger, and there's money involved for them to create the systems. The people who create the BISAC codes, which is what genre everything is, that's a whole separate little thing. And they have Book Scan, which also has been bought up by a bunch of different people. So that's also toy scans and licensing scans and all of this kind of stuff. Comics, because retailers are all mavericks, and because we did not have unified point of sale systems, we were never able to report the sell-through data, which is to me so much more important than the sell-in data, which is just how many copies were sold to stores, not how many copies are rotting in the back room.
Right.
So.
Right.
Wow.
Now, I would think that Discovery and Disney would be very interested in that data.
They are, but the data doesn't exist at the moment. And because of the way things have changed, they used to be able to get initial orders from Diamond and then their last minute final order cutoff, which is the stuff like 3 weeks before the book comes out when we place our final orders. Because of logistical changes and everything now, Marvel is not getting any initial order data. They don't get their orders until the last minute. And DC is having that same problem. And they're having conversations with us. How are we going to be able to get some manner of initial data, because they want to be able to see what kind of announcements, what kind of marketing, what do we do that leads to bumps in pre-orders for titles. Yeah, exactly. So, and I know that they're desperate for these numbers because a lot of them have to just appease some bean counter 2 levels up. He doesn't know what he's looking at. He just wants one number to look at. And if that number is better than the last month's number, he's happy. And so you do have to kind of cook the numbers and try to come up with new and interesting ways to try to say, no, we're doing okay. But the comic industry does still have a lot of growing up to do to become technologically advanced into this. I'm sorry, like you said, it's hard to get me to stop talking.
No, I mean, I think to me that's one of the, when I look at the business, it seems like it was so. I mean, comics got drugged into being updated to being, digital. It's always being forced at the last minute, to go through the chrysalis stage and like, oh, now we're gonna embrace using a computer, and now we're gonna embrace using the internet, and we're gonna, it was always, it's still the cheapskate Martin Goodman people who don't want to,
Digital comics, I will say, are not a horrible thing because, you can sort of browse, you can just sort of, it's like going to Costco on a Saturday and tasting a whole bunch of different little things. And then you can come to your comic shop and figure out what you want. But digital comics are never quite going to appeal to the comic collector like regular comics are, because you can point to, look, I got 40,000 comics, right? You can't say, hey, here's my iPad. I got 40,000 comics on it. Not near, doesn't impress the women at all. I can have an iPad as well. So, and also you cannot share. You cannot share digital comics.
Last word. We're over time. Anything for people to know, Joe, on your way out the door?
Support your local comic shop. Go talk to them. Have fun, man. If it's a good shop, you're gonna have a good time.
I love it. And go Blue Hens.
Yes, exactly.
Guys, I don't know where the time went. It melted, but it melted in such a great way. Joe, thank you so much for being on the show. We'd love to have you back, and I love the community we built here. We had a full house, and I want you to go home and take a nap before you.
I've already gotten the come home email.
Yeah,
where are you?
I'm sure you got that.
I told her I wouldn't be home until after 10.
So, guys, thank you so much.
She must need a jar opened. That's probably what's going on.
So we couldn't get to everyone's questions. We had like 30 questions in the thing. So we did our best.
Always happy to come back.
We'll have to do a part 2. So we're gonna pull the ripcord here, guys. Thank you so much. What's up?
I do want to thank all you guys, because each of you on this screen has done me many solids over the years, and helped make Captain Blue Hen what it is. So,
you know what? I'm blushing. Thank you so much. All right, guys, we're going to call it. Thank you guys so much for your eyeballs. We'll be back here next week with a fantastic show. Our good buddy Muse Brooker is going to be on the show, who is a supervising animator for the new Lil Kev show on BET, and also is an old friend of mine and an animation great. And also, I'll be back here tomorrow at 9 p.m. for a coffee break with JN. I hope to see Joe Murray there. Okay. And yeah, I guess that's it. Let's go walk our dogs. Thank you so much. And Joe, we do a thing on our way out of here. I hope you can do it with us. Guys, we're at the end game, literally. So it will behoove you to make sure that your Kirby hands are clean. Let's see some Kirby hands, Joe. There you go.
That's
some flat fingers. There you go. All right. We're good.
That's a good Kirby hand.
Yeah. There's my Gil Kane.
Cane nostrils, everyone.
All right. See you next time. Take care.